Let's see here. Well, turn it on. Yeah, I got to turn the thing on. There you go. So after the whole debacle with David and Bathsheba, David was repentant and everything, and David had this child. It wasn't the little baby's fault. David and Bathsheba's child got sick, and David was grieved over this. And for 7 days, the Bible says he fasted and he prayed and he fasted and he prayed. And then finally, this little baby died. And, the baby was the result of David's sin. But the death of this child in eternity, God saved the soul of this little baby. That's not a question, but it certainly grieved David and Bathsheba. So David, at the end of this 7 days, when the baby dies, everybody wonders that he gets up and shaves and goes about his business, and they say, wow, why are you doing this? And he said, well, while he was alive, I was praying and hoping that something would happen, but now that he's dead, why should I go on fasting? Can I bring him back again? I will go to him, but he will not return unto me. There's a lot of things I think about when I read this story, but one of them, my father always taught me this. He said, you can't do anything about what passed. You can grieve over it all your life. You can worry about it all your life, but that's done with. What you have to do is move forward after that. So that's what David did, and that's what all of us in one way or another have to do. We have to move forward with our lives. Now, the lesson today is a weird lesson, and it shows how messed up things were at this time. By this time, according to the book of 2 Samuel, David had at least 17 sons and some number of daughters, which we don't know how many daughters, by who knows how many different wives. See? So he had 17 sons that we know about, and an undetermined number of daughters. Now, these sons had different mothers, see? Some of them maybe a couple of them had a mother in common or something, but they had different mothers. And the different mothers had different children, like daughters also, see? So the story that we have today is about one of the sons and his sister, and another of the sons, and one of the sons of David, one of the princes, the book of Samuel would call them princes, fell in love with the sister of another one of his sons. So Amnon, one of David's sons, fell in love with Tamar, who was Absalom's sister, not Amnon's sister, but Absalom's sister. Now, if you go back into the book of Leviticus, in Leviticus 18, you can see every kind of forbidden incestuous relationship that is listed there. See? And it gets kind of murky here, because think of this, you got all these different family subsets and these different wives and different children for them and this huge extended family. And so Amnon, he falls in love with Absalom's sister. Would that make them half brothers, half sisters? Maybe. It's hard for me to figure it all out. But he falls in love with her, and he gets infatuated with her, and he can't think of anything besides her. And he plots this premeditated plan to get her alone and have sex with her, which he knows was a wrong thing to do, but he did it anyway. And as quick as she told him, no, please don't do this, and he did it anyway. And then the very next verse, which is 2 Samuel 13, verse 15, after he had done it, he said, Amnon hated her with intense hatred. See, he can't take his mind off of her, and he's infatuated with her. Now he violates her. Now he hates her with intense hatred. In fact, he hated her more than he had loved her. And Amnon said to her, "Get up and get out." So now he's violated this girl, and he's done with her, and she is devastated, of course, and she leaves. But then she comes to Absalom, the other brother, who loves his sister, and realizes now what his brother has done to his sister, and he hates his brother. Now, look down at 2 Samuel chapter 13, and about verse 20. Let's see what verse I've got up here. Okay, verse 20. Her brother Absalom said to her, "Has that Amnon, your brother, been with you? Be quiet now, my sister. He is your brother. Don't take this thing to heart." Wow. And Tamar lived in her brother Absalom's house, a desolate woman. When David heard all this, he was furious. Well, I guess, can you imagine in your own family something like this happen? But, we think of our families as our kind of families. We think of a family living in a house together and all of the people together and interacting, but we're not really thinking of the 17 different sons by however many wives, and they're living in probably different locations and the interactions there. And also, JV was talking to me before class about, the way that women were treated in this whole situation. And so this poor girl is living in Absalom's life or house, but it says here in 2 Samuel chapter 13, verse 21, when David heard all this, he was furious. Absalom never said a word to Amnon, either good or bad. He hated Amnon because he had disgraced his sister. Now, this brings up a scripture, Ephesians 4:26. Be angry, but do not sin. Let not the sun go down upon your anger, neither give a foothold to the devil. But see, Absalom had good reason to be angry with his brother, right? In fact, he could have pushed for the death penalty against his brother. But he swallowed his anger, and he let that stew, and he gave the devil a foothold. Now, I would have been angry. I might have killed somebody. But Absalom felt that way, but he didn't do anything, but he plotted in his mind. David was furious, it says, but evidently David didn't do anything to the son that committed the crime. Is that messed up or what? So this prince gets away with violating this girl, and those that receive the damage, they're left there to suffer, and Absalom is furious in his heart, and he just plots there. He didn't do anything for a good while. Well, look at this. After 2 full years. See, he planned his next move for 2 years. Now think of that. For 2 years, he's hating his brother that did this. For 2 years, he's thinking about how he can get revenge. For 2 years, he's wondering how he can make this happen. See? And this anger and this hatred is eating him alive. For that same 2 years, Amnon must be thinking he's getting away scot-free with what he did. Maybe he's not even thinking about it anymore. Maybe he doesn't think this woman is even worth giving a second thought to, because she was just a woman, But Absalom hadn't forgotten this. So after 2 years, Absalom had sheep shearers at Baal Hazor, which is near Ephraim, and Absalom invited all the king's sons. So it's sheep shearing time, and he invites all the princes. Now remember, at this point in time, there were at least 17 princes. Maybe more, but there were 17 that we know about, princes. And he says he invites them all up. And so Absalom goes to his father, and he says, I want you to let all the princes come. And here in this passage on the screen, Absalom said, If not, please let my brother Amnon go with us. And the king said to him, why should he go with you? But Absalom pressed him, I want my brother Amnon to come with us. Absalom pressed him until he let Amnon and all the king's sons go with him. See? So, okay, we're all going up to have sheep shearing time. And that was a time of work, yes, but it was also a time of rejoicing and everything over the sheep and the sheep shearing. So here's what Absalom told all of his brothers. Mark when Amnon's heart is merry with wine, and when I say to you, strike Amnon, then kill him. Do not fear. Have I not commanded you? Be courageous and be valiant. So the servants of Absalom did to Amnon as Absalom had commanded, and then all the king's sons arose, and each mounted his mule and fled. So imagine 17 guys pulling out their knives or whatever and attacking this one guy and chopping him up bad. Well, you know what I think is he needed chopping up. And part of me says he got exactly what he deserved, which he did. He got chopped up. But now, think of the family situation. We have this mess. A daughter's been raped. A son's been murdered. There's hatred that's gone on for years inside the family. Can you imagine being in that family? Can you imagine the strained relations that must have gone on? What do we do with grudges that we have in families? See, this was never worked out. It was just allowed to be there. It was just allowed to fester. It was allowed to erupt into something terrible and horrible, and it ended up in murder. See? So Absalom got his revenge. Then the report went out to David that all of his sons had been killed by Absalom. All the princes were dead except one. That's gossip, and David was terrified. And so Jonadab, the son of Shemaiah, David's brother, came to David and said, let not my lord suppose that they have killed all the young men, the king's sons, for Amnon alone is dead. For by the command of Absalom, this has been determined from the day he violated his sister Tamar. He planned it for 2 years. Do you call that premeditated or not? I think it's at least 2 years premeditated. It was not a crime of the moment, see? So he says, now therefore let not my lord the king so take it to heart as to suppose that all the king's sons are dead, for Amnon alone is dead, but Absalom fled. So now, let's add this up. We got one daughter raped and desolated. We've got a son that's been murdered. Now we've got Absalom who's fled, and he's estranged from his father. He's had to leave from his father. Why did he had to leave? Well, he killed his brother. Well, why did he kill his brother? Because the brother raped the sister. Yes, ma'am. I think it's the ones that came with him. I think it's the brothers that were kind of obeying Absalom.
Does Absalom, is he like an older brother that has seniority on him that they obey him?
I'm not sure. Absalom certainly seems to be commanded the rest of them. Yeah, so I don't know what the dynamic is there. I don't really have the idea of yes, ma'am, Sonia. Yeah.
Then, other people knew about it in the family, and nobody did anything about it.
Yes. Is that not weird? Other people knew about it in the family, and nobody did anything about it. So let's get real. Let's go back to our former days in rural America here. Were there cases where there was incest in families, and families knew about it, and nobody said anything about it, and feelings were let go over long periods of time? I know there were. See? And so this kind of thing is so destructive and so evil. And here's David, the man after God's own heart. I'm going to insist that y'all don't think of that as a paintbrush that paints his entire life. But this guy has terrible, terrible problems in his family. He's built a kingdom. God has blessed him to build this kingdom. He's messed up badly with Bathsheba, and he himself has had a guy murdered. Well, maybe think about it this way. Well, I had Uriah the Hittite murdered, and Amnon, our Absalom murdered his brother, but, it's messed up. What we're lacking here is consistency. We're lacking somebody that would provide a consistent example over time that would be the right thing all the time. But most of us in life are not always consistent, see? And hopefully, David tries to gravitate back to God here, but Absalom flees. So Absalom fled, it says, and he went to Talmai, the son of Ammihud, king of Geshur, and David mourned for his son day after day. Now, I read that to mean he mourned for Amnon, who was murdered. Okay? Absalom now is the bad guy, and Absalom has fled. So Absalom fled and went to Geshur and was there for 3 years. So for 2 years, he plans this murder. Now he's banished from his father, and he stays gone for 3 years from his father. How long do you go not speaking to somebody in your family? 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, a lifetime can go by. People stay estranged. No reconciliation takes place. So he was there 3 years. And the spirit of the king, see, after a while, David had finished mourning for Amnon. The spirit of the king longed to go out to Absalom because he was comforted about Amnon since he was dead. So he's saying, I wish I had my son Absalom back. Why didn't you punish the brother that did the bad thing in the first place? Why did you let this go on so long? We could ask all those questions. All right. So this estrangement took a long time, and Joab, who was David's general, he saw the estrangement Absalom kept out there. Evidently, Absalom had a good personality. A lot of people liked Absalom. And the king wished he'd come home, but didn't. He was kind of conflicted. And so Joab finds this woman from Tekoa, and he puts together this plot that I want you to go to the king, and I want you to tell him this story about having 2 sons, and one of them kills the other, and how now the other one's life is threatened, and put this scenario in front of the king so that the king can see the problem from a different perspective. In other words, this woman is going to tell him about his own situation, but put it in a story for him so he'll see it. Isn't it true that sometimes we can see things when they're about other people? But when they're about us, it's like, well, my situation's different. Is it really? So this woman comes and she tells David this story about her 2 sons. The woman of Tekoa came to the king. And the king said to her, what is your trouble? And she answered, alas, I am a widow. My husband is dead. Your servant, that's the woman, had 2 sons, and they quarreled with one another, and there was no one to separate them, and the one struck the other and killed him. See, just like one of David's sons struck the other son and killed him. And now the whole clan has risen against your servant, and they say, give up the man who struck his brother, that we may put him to death after the life of his brother whom he killed. and they would destroy the heir also. Thus they would quench my coal that is left and leave to my husband neither name or remnant on the face of the earth. And David says, no, I won't have it. We'll forgive that son, and your heir won't die, and we'll go ahead and forgive him. Well, then the woman starts talking to David about his situation. And David says, now, has Joab put you up to this? And that tells you that Joab had been saying, why don't you let the young man come home? Why? It's been 3 years. Why don't you let Absalom come home? Joab's pleading, and Joab's trying to get this done. So David finally finds out, that this is really about that. And so the woman says, please let the king invoke the Lord your God, that the avenger of blood kill no more, and my son be not destroyed. And he said, as the Lord lives, not one hair of your son shall fall to the ground. And she said, well, what about your son? See? So that's when David kind of sees the situation. So he finally capitulates and lets Joab go get Absalom. So Joab arose and went to Geshur and brought Absalom to Jerusalem. So everybody's, yay, and finally they're going to be reconciled. And the king said, let him dwell apart in his own house. He is not to come into my presence. Oh, please. So after 3 years, his son comes home. And he says, okay, he can come home, but I don't want to look at his face. Seriously? Now, I'm thinking that this strikes a little closer to home than some of us would like to admit in some cases. See? Because once we get something in our craw and our pride and we're not going to sit down, we're not going to reconcile, I don't want to see his face. So now the young man comes home, and he's banished at home. He was banished for 3 years. Now he's banished at home. Now, how is this going to make the young man feel? See, my father hates me, and I'm never going to get back in the good grace of my father. Do you think there was any resentment in Absalom? Yeah, why didn't he do something about this man that raped my sister? So there had to be resentment there, and it was, we can understand it. I can understand it, see? But it seems to him that there's no chance in getting back into his father's good graces. Now let's think about that. Yes, Brother Barry, speak up.
It appears that that was one of David's major faults in his personality. He couldn't see his own sin. The woman had pointed out to him through a different story, and if you go back a couple, chapters, Nathan had to do the same thing with the sin to Uriah. But all of this was prophesied by Nathan. Nathan told him the sword's never going to leave your house.
Yes, that's good. He points out that, Nathan had pointed out that all this was going to happen, and David had trouble seeing his own sin. He did. But think about the prodigal son. The prodigal son messes up big time, and he goes away, and his father lets him come back home, doesn't he? David won't let the son come back home. How many times has our father had to let us come back home? But David won't let his son come back home. There's got to be forgiveness in our life somewhere, right? Forgiveness has to be coming. I think of James 5:16, which a lot of people misuse, and they make it about people coming down the aisle. Confess your faults one to another and pray for one another that you may be healed. That's talking about people coming together and saying, I was wrong, I'm sorry. I was wrong, I'm sorry. And reconciling and forgiving one another. There should have been forgiveness here. There should have been forgiveness a long time ago, but there was none here. So Absalom lived apart in his own house and did not come into the king's presence. So think of, you had 3 years, you had 2 years he was away, and in 3 years he was banished. And now you've got more years where he's there by himself, and his dad won't look at him, won't put him in his presence. Okay? So Absalom lived 2 years in Jerusalem without seeing the king's face. Then Absalom sent for Joab in order to send him to the king, but Joab refused to come to him. And he sent a second time, and he refused to come. So now even Joab, he's out of the reconciling business. Evidently, he knows David wants no part of it. So he won't even give the boy a chance. Then he said to his servant, "Look, Joab's field is next to mine, and he has barley there. Go set it on fire." Holy moly. So now the boy's going to get somebody's attention. Now, this is a grown man. How can we get his attention? We're going to set David's general's field on fire and burn his barley crop up. Maybe that'll get his attention. Well, after people are banished and hurt and exiled and shunned for so long, are they going to show out sometimes? Are they going to do things? Maybe so. All of this can be avoided. It could have been avoided. It's tragic. It could have been avoided. So, one time when I was a kid, I accidentally set a field on fire, but not on purpose. And this guy set this field on fire, and it was a cry for attention. It was a cry for help. It was a cry for his father to notice him and speak to him. We need to speak to our family members. We need to forgive when time is there to forgive. So Absalom says to Joab, "Behold, I sent word to you, come here that I may send you to the king to ask, why have I come from Geshur? It would be better for me to be there still. Now, therefore, let me go into the presence of the king, and if there's guilt in me, just let him kill me. Either kill me or let me get back in the presence of my father." Wow. This is bad, isn't it? Yeah, Absalom was guilty for killing his brother, who raped his sister. Yeah, he was guilty. But you could argue some things. If you go back into Leviticus and look at the penalties for rape and everything, you could argue that Absalom was probably the more justified of the people in this situation. I'm thinking that Absalom was not necessarily a basically bad guy. He tried to take care of his sister, but this estrangement forced him into a situation where he built up resentment and bad feelings, and anyway, he demanded to get back into the presence of his father. So then Joab went to the king and told him, and he summoned Absalom. So he came to the king and bowed himself on his face to the ground before the king, and the king kissed Absalom. Okay. But now the young man's kind of broken. And his dad's embraced him, but there's been a lot of damage done. Bittersweet reunion after 5 years of tension and estrangement. Let's don't let that happen. Let's don't let that happen. Let's make things right. Let's forgive one another. Let's get back together before that kind of tragedy takes over in these situations. All right? So, after this, see, now he's sort of back in the king's good graces. After this, Absalom got himself a chariot and horses and 50 men to run before him. Okay? And he was a handsome young man, and he was a personable young man. And this is in 2 Samuel chapter 15. And it tells us that as he would ride around in Judea and Jerusalem, Absalom would get out among the people. And Absalom would talk to the people. And if people had problems, Absalom would come and put his arm around the people, and he would try to help them with their problems. And so Absalom was gaining popularity among the people because he was out among the people, and he was personable, and everybody liked him, and he was handsome. And so that last part in red there So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. Now what's he doing? Now he's going to get his father back. Well, I thought David kissed his son. Well, he did after 5 years. See, this ain't over. This is not over. And it could have been over a long time ago, but it's not over. And it's not going to be over until Absalom's dead hanging in a tree. And finally then, David kind of gets his head back together. And you find David a little bit later, in this weeping his heart out, he says, "Oh, Absalom, Absalom, oh, my son Absalom, oh, my son." Well, where was that? Years and years before. Why did you wait till he was dead hanging in a tree before you cried your eyes out like that over your son? Okay, so you say, wow, this is not a fun story. No, it's not. This is the messiness of life, isn't it? This is what happens when we let anger get a foothold. Go back to Ephesians 4:26. You can be angry, but do not sin. Do not let the sun go down upon your anger, neither give the devil a foothold. David's family let the devil get a foothold, didn't they? And it ripped that family apart. Sad. Sad. And, we're going to talk in our next lesson about how that turned out. So here's Absalom, and he's out there, and he's got his arm around every farmer and everybody out there, and he's being their best buddy. That's politicking, isn't it? Is there ever politicking in families where we try to set one person against another person? Yeah. Or in churches, he's out there politicking. He's winning the hearts and minds. And what's David doing? I don't know. I don't know what David's doing. Maybe he's focused on battles. Maybe he's focused on something else. But now he's got a commander that's running his battles. His children are falling apart. When things are not good in the family, things can't hardly be good anywhere, can they? So to do the Lord's will in our family is a very, very, very important thing. Yes, sir, Brother Jeff.
You can't help but wonder how things would have turned around or been if David hadn't committed the sin of Bathsheba.
Yeah, if David hadn't committed the sin with Bathsheba, things might have been different. If David had just punished the son that violated his daughter right then, things might have been so different. But hindsight, huh? Hindsight. We learn from our mistakes a lot of times, don't we? Yep. Anybody else I'm ignoring that's trying to bring up a point or question on this? Yes, sir. Yeah. Two wrongs don't make a right. They usually just multiply more wrongs, don't they? Did his sister want him killed? It may be. But it was certainly Absalom that wanted it. Yeah.
I'm shocked he didn't go after his uncle.
What's that?
I'm shocked he didn't go after his uncle. His uncle's the one that plotted it all.
His uncle what?
But he the one to come up with the plan?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So there's lots of plotting in here, and there's lots of intrigue in this whole thing. So pretty bad.
Family's too precious to be mad and want to do harm to your brothers and sisters. It's just, it's hard for me to imagine.
Yeah.
But it happens, I know.
It does. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Yeah, so this is messed up too, but what Janice says makes a lot of sense. If you read the story in the Bible, after Tamar was raped by Amnon, she asked Amnon to be able to stay with him and for him to marry her. Now, to me, that's messed up because she's got to be his half-sister or something like that, and I don't think that was actually legal, but she asked for that, and if Amnon had treated her differently and not thrown her out and not been so mean to her, then that might have turned out differently too, yes. But of course, he hated her, and she said in her comment that he probably hated himself, and that made him hate her. Yes, there's so much in here that's so messed up. So why do we have it in the Bible? Well, because the Bible is just telling you the story of what happened. And on the top of that story of all this tragedy that happened, there's God's purpose of the Davidic dynasty and the Davidic kingship and eventually bringing Christ into the world. But God's overarching purpose is being worked out there. But he's just telling you the good, the bad, and the ugly that happened in the families of the people that are dealing with in the story. So, I mean, isn't that what's happening today? God is working through us in his ways, and there's good and bad that happens in our families, and we try to, and in each individual life, and we try to navigate those things and go on through life and do good when it's all said and done. But JV, you're thinking hard. Spit it out back there, bro. Huh? Oh, okay. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
You know, Tamar begged her brother not to do that and said, you know, go to your king and he will allow, she said he will, not withhold her from him. Do you think that's the case?
Yeah. Damon is pointing out that Tamar had said to Amnon, go ask the king for my hand, and he would probably give her. And do I think that's the case? It may be. They were not following God's laws as far as the book of Leviticus and as far as the book of Genesis. They were not doing that. JV and I were talking before class about the fact that look at the way women were being treated in this whole thing. Women were not being treated well in a lot of these cases. The Bible doesn't dwell on it here, but certainly that was the case. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Well, the fact that he had so many wives to start with, I mean, there was no really connection between the brothers. I mean, it's like they were all from different wives.
Yeah.
It was like they didn't really look at each other as a brother. They were actually from another mother. That it was like just a jumbled mess.
Yeah. Yeah, they had different mothers, and they probably didn't live in the same household, so they looked at family differently. So when you read this story in Samuel, don't try to make a moral lesson out of every single thing you read. Just realize that God is telling you what happened. And he's telling you how his plan worked in spite of it. Yes?
I think the big picture is that David, in spite of all his faults, still had the heart of God.
Well, he still tried to come back eventually, didn't he? Yes, he did. Okay, well, let's let that be that, and we'll call it quits for this morning.